Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for making some time today to join us here, and thanks to the guys at AVEVA Select California for hosting this event and giving us an opportunity to speak with you. My name is John Krajewski. I'm based out of our Lake Forest AVEVA office. Traditionally, that was the Wonderware campus, and so I've been with the company since it was called Wonderware. I joined about 23 years ago or so, and started as the demo kid in the room, and I have worked my way up, and now I'm responsible for product strategy for the operations control portion of our portfolio, which I'll be talking a bit about today. I'll try to focus a little bit in the area of SCADA, and I'll explain that as this is mostly a focus about how you modernize your SCADA, but also talk about kind of the new levels of expectations and some of the things that we're pressing upon in this space. When we talk about the operations control portion of the portfolio, as Wonderware, our portfolio was kind of easy to understand. You had InTouch, and you had some of the things that tacked on to InTouch. But now as AVEVA, I would forgive you if you were to go, I don't know what a lot of the boxes on this screen mean. And I could understand that as we've gone through a lot of numbers of mergers and acquisitions, and we have everything from high fidelity plant simulation products and operator trainer simulation systems to 3D fidelity design systems to information management systems and cloud stuff. And many of these things may not be of much of interest to you. I have focused in that traditional space that has been in that operations control. What I like to describe it as the stuff that sits on the OT network, right? The stuff that may sit side by side or co-located with those controllers, those PLCs, those DCSs, those RTUs. That's kind of the area that my stuff resides in. And we're going to focus on that particular area for most of my discussion here. I could probably spend the entire 25 minutes I've been allocated on this particular slide alone, but I won't. Now, I recognize through having some conversations with the people in the room here that people have probably joined us at a lot of different points in time, right? And so Wonderware became pretty large in the early 90s. They began in 1987, and they were a company of one product initially. It was InTouch, and InTouch really put them on the map, and InTouch became very, very highly adopted in the marketplace. And we have had people that have gone, some people, anybody here go back as far as InTouch 7, or InTouch 6, 5? 4. Anybody low as 4? Got a 4 here. 4 is where we really, the first 3 versions, I think we're kind of getting our legs stretched, and 4 is where we started to really make progress inside of the market there. So you will see some people there. Very often, one of the problems that creates for us in terms of quite honestly, like our own corporate reputation is people know what we were here. They have no idea what all this stuff is. What happened since, right? In many cases, we see customers that put a system in, they develop the system, let's say 1996, put that system in, and we've helped you to maintain that system. So you'll be able to upgrade it. It continues to operate. But someone looks at it here in 2023 and goes, what in God's name is that monstrosity? Because it still looks like something that was built in 1996. And so there's often been a lot of changes in courses we've made. Going fast forwarding to 2003, this is the first project that I got involved in when I joined the Wonderware team. Was a project that was called Magellan. The major issues we were facing at the time is that there were certain things that InTouch was fantastic at and certain things that InTouch wasn't so great at. So when somebody had a very large geographically distributed application, InTouch wasn't so hot there, right? That's where InTouch shined. InTouch tended to shine where it was kind of co-located inside of a process cell next to the equipment that you were operating, but not if I had to do, a large water distribution network and managing all the pump stations and filtration units and wastewater. If you were looking at the entire system as a collective, there were issues with regards to how you manage that whole system. And we've been introduced and we dreamt up and built from the ground up something we called that initially. It was called Industrial Application Server. The technology was called Orchestra. Eventually, we packaged some things together and called it System Platform, where we took that Industrial Application Server, combined it with the Historian. At that time, we combined it with something called Information Server, and we brought that together as System Platform. And I don't know if I don't show it here. There it is. Those are those 3 servers that are shown in that box. Those were the 3 components that kind of comprised of what was System Platform. Fast forward, and we actually, the first version of System Platform, we got out to the market more rapidly. We had some investors which are like, get this thing out into the streets. We need to start utilizing it. So we accelerated its adoption by utilizing InTouch as the front end. So System Platform was a complete and totally different back end of the system. And then we created InTouch as a front end on top of that system. It worked so darn well that actually InTouch was our primary interface on top of System Platform for, I think, 15 years or so. We've continued to focus on doing things like InTouch Access Anywhere. We've had an increasing number of people who are saying, I don't want to have to install software on a machine. I want to be able to just use it. So whether or not I'm using remote desktop servers or if I just want to use a browser to be able to access that content, InTouch Access Anywhere was able to utilize, bring us browsers. We made a huge investment in the area of situational awareness, which started to change. Wonderware kind of got known for very showy, very colorful graphics, right? That was kind of our big reputation, if you will. It was interesting because in this particular space, it was sort of diametrically opposed. It was more about how do you properly empower an individual. And we did a lot of studies, did a lot of work trying to understand what does it take, if somebody has responsibility for over 1,000 assets, how do you make sure that they're making the right decision in the right time? And 1,000 assets actually is not a large number anymore. We're seeing some people and they have a responsibility for multiple thousands of assets. And so how do you provide the right information in time? I'll give you an example. Alarm banners suck for that. Right now, everybody here's probably got an alarm banner in your application, and those things are one of the most awful ways of being able to present information. It's my own pet peeve, if I'm being honest, in that area. 2017 was a huge year for us, where it was the first introduction of a visual system built from the ground up for system platform. So when I talk about built from the ground up for system platform, it knows how to use that asset model that's already inside a system platform. So traditionally, ways you do navigation in virtually almost every other package in the world is you create a graphic, you drop some stuff onto the graphic, you put buttons that link the graphic together. That is not the way operations management interface works. The way operations management interface works is that you create a navigation model. You already have it in system platform. It's called your asset model. You use that asset model, and then basically what it does is it will find content associated with those assets and bring it forward. So you don't double click and put things on the screen. What happens, I go to like my asset, let's say I have a pump, and I can define a faceplate for that pump. I create a region on my screen, we call it a pane, say this region is faceplate, configuration done. Now, whether or not it's a faceplate for the pump, faceplate for the drive, faceplate for anything, it knows where to go on the screen. You don't actually have to configure it in management. One of the major things we were trying to accomplish here is that we had an increasing number of customers who went from maybe 100 screens to 1,000 screens to several thousand screens. And we had to figure, how do you do this in volume? And increasingly, we were focusing on how do you integrate into other pieces of software. And around this time frame, we were asking a lot of our customers, what other softwares are you investing in across your business? And at that time, the answers tended to be somewhere around 15 to 20. I continue to ask that question on a daily basis. And when I ask it of a lot of the IT ownership people and the OT ownership people within a customer, we're starting to hear that number reach 40. 40 different software packages, of which ours is only one of them, right? A lot of those other software packages are not AVEVA packages, right? They could be, I've got a GIS system over here, I've got a quality management application over here, I've got an enterprise asset management package over here, I've got some production scheduling equipment or packages over here. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because increasingly the focus is not just getting the data, because in order for you to make the decisions that are proper for you to actually execute your process, the information is less and less only coming from the control devices. Classic HMI and SCADA is pull the information out of that PLC, that RTU, that DCS, and put it in front of the user, let him make a decision. If the decision you're making is, do I turn this thing on or off? Usually that information is, you can do that. But should I turn this thing on or off? Typically that information is not coming out of the PLC. I may need to know what's the cost of energy at this point in time. What is the demand on the network? Could I hold off on doing this production until the costs are lower and so I can be more profitable as an organization? Those are increasingly the types of decisions that we're hearing people needing to make. And the information needs to come from all of those different types of sources. So you'll often hear me use the terms of IT and OT convergence, where you need to bring the information together from a number of sources to be able to make a different decision. Not do I run or do I not run, but how do I run more profitably? How do I operate my business more effectively? And so we start looking at operations management interface, not at just being able to operate the process, but to facilitate your operations of your business. Again, I can go on this for hours and hours. We really have liked that a lot. We started going full native web in 2020. So for a lot of our technologies, they're desktop technologies, but we started going full native web in 2020, and I can show demos of it in the expo. I got some stuff out there that you would be very interested to see, and some very cool stuff. In 2021, we introduced during the pandemic something we call the AVEVA Operations Control. Now, through a series of mergers and acquisitions, I started to have a lot of products that came in the area. And so I realized that sitting down and having a conversation about this became difficult. It was like, let's talk about product A, product B, product C. 10 minutes on, we're like, what are all these products? I can't figure them out. And so one of the things that we've decided to do differently in terms of the way we go to market is to not sell products individually as we go forward, but to sell them as a collective. You've all seen great examples of this in the marketplace if you've ever used like Microsoft 365, or what they used to call Office 365, where I get access to not only my Excel, my PowerPoint, my Word, but I also have access to things like OneDrive and what used to be called Skype and Link, and now they're more Teams, and all of these things come together, and you have mail servers. Well, in this particular case, you'll see us talking a lot about operations control, where you get the entire package, and it's done in a completely different commercial manner. So we're really excited about this. And increasingly, our focus is going to be not only to be able to deliver things in a portable manner. Web is portable. What I mean by portable is I can run it on anything, right? If I've got an industrial computer, I can run the thing. If I've got an iPad, I can run the thing. If I've got a phone, I can run the thing, or anything that can bring up a browser, a TV, then I can utilize it. So that's what we mean when we talk about being portable. But increasingly, one of the number one things that we hear our customers talk about, the challenges that they face, is the life cycle ownership. What's that mean? Well, I've actually had some conversations with people here this week where they're saying, well, I'm on some version that's very old that you no longer even support anymore. And they're struggling to be able to maintain, update, upgrade, and stay modern in those things. So when we start talking about software as a service, we're looking at mechanisms so that how can we potentially take that off your plate? How could we get it so that you're staying constantly current? I like to use the analogy of Netflix. How many times have you had to upgrade your Netflix server? Hopefully never, because that's not what you do, right? That's the responsibility of Netflix. Could we take that responsibility on ourselves? Now, I think it'll be quite a while before we're doing that on plant floor devices, but in terms of the things we do with like Insight, for anybody who's seen Insight, you never upgrade Insight, we manage it. We manage its total life cycle. You never actually have to buy a computer to run your Insight, because that's what our job is. We're gonna run those things up on the cloud. And increasing, I'll talk about other offers and we're put in that space. So when we talk about modernizing SCADA very often is now going outside of the scope of SCADA. It's starting into the overall end-to-end operations and the things that you're trying to address. So I'll dig a bit into this, and we'll happy to have discussions throughout the course of the day. I started to put this picture together really to help people kind of understand, as opposed to figuring out what individual products do. Let's talk about what you're doing. Now, this is an example of what I call a day in the life of. Now, there are different days and different lives of different people. So this is an example of someone that typically is a operator in a more of a SCADA type application, where there's a distributed application. You have a large team that's working on these systems and the things that you're looking to do. The point being here is that when you look at modernizing SCADA, there are certain points that you're going to absolutely continue to do. I need to change the operational state of the system. Yes, that is a very core SCADA function. But increasingly, we're looking at is that before you've even left your home, can you get an opportunity to get a preview of what's happening in the site? So you know that when you arrive on site, do I need to hit the ground running because I got fires burning? Or do I have an opportunity to stop off the cafeteria and grab a cup of coffee and then, leisurely begin my day? And these are a lot of different examples, and I can certainly go through this in a lot of detail, but I won't be able to here. But the key point here is that we're looking throughout the entire course of the day. Most of these little things are different products that we would have sold in the past. In the past, we would have said product A fits this bill, product B fits this bill. Increasing now, we're going to market with this entire thing as a single entity. We call that AVEVA Operations Control. So much like you have Microsoft Office, AVEVA Operations Control is that analogy in that space. So it kind of helps you understand what we're running after there. I would tell you that increasingly some of the things that we're doing here that fill in those gaps of that day in the life are things that we're doing as software as a service. Software as a service, following the Netflix analogy, is that you don't actually maintain it all. It becomes our responsibility, but it adds value. So one of the value things we're doing here is a product called Teamwork. I'll put Brian on blast here. Brian over there by the door, if you raise your hand, Brian, he is the product manager for Teamwork. So he'll actually also be in the expo. He's a product manager for a few things. He also is Integration Studio as well as our reports package. So if you have detailed questions on Teamwork, feel free to go at Brian. But ultimately, one of the problems that we were looking to solve with this is that I would speak to a lot of the executives who are running the operations of these different organizations. They would say that their number one challenge are the people. Now, the people aren't necessarily the challenge. The problem is that they come in, they spend 1 or 2 years becoming good at the process, and then they retire or they move on. You don't retire after 2 years, sorry, that's a mix up words there, but they leave, right? They're no longer in there. So the intellectual property of that business that they put into that person's head now starts to walk out. But how can I retain that knowledge as I have a shift in my resourcing, my staff? They're identifying that people typically stayed in positions much shorter than they had in the past. And so they were constantly having to retrain people. And this is one of the tools that we're working in this area of Teamwork. So it allows you to do things like Hey, when I see something, I'm walking on the plant floor, there's a light blinking, I can pop open my phone, take a quick picture or a video of that light, put it up there. Anybody know why this light's blinking? I can crowdsource that information. Yeah, I know why that light's blinking. That light's blinking because you have to replace the relay in that third cup over there, blah, blah, blah. And then you can put that information together, store it as a troubleshoot instruction for someone in the future to be able to see that same type of information. To digitize the knowledge within your organization is a part of what is teamwork. Now, is that a SCADA function? I would tell you no, it's not a SCADA function, but as I start to pivot my expectations, not toward SCADA, but toward day-to-day operational activities, this is a core function that I believe will help you. Doing things as simple as shift handovers and other different types of things. Does that actually have to sit in an on-premise industrial computer behind the firewall? No, it doesn't. That can easily be stored in the cloud, and then we can maintain those systems for you so that you don't have to worry about how do I get off of version X because I'm going to have to introduce some downtime. We manage those expectations for you. Another one of our major offers in this area is Insight, and I think if you don't know Mike Gross, you should learn about Mike Gross. He's got a booth out there in the expo area, and he'll be able to talk to you about Insight. Insight in its first incarnation was called Wonderware Historian Online. I think we did that 8 or 9 years ago. It was a pretty long time ago at this point, where we first started to identify that Microsoft's major investment was in cloud computing. Google's major investment was in cloud computing. Amazon's major investment was in cloud computing. And we started to try and understand how can we leverage this new major operating systems of technology to do different things. So we started by first being able to get the information out there. Now, in this particular case, it's gone far greater than simply being a historian in the cloud. But that's where it started. That was its initial phases. Over those 8 years, we've learned a lot about doing things like dev operations. We have a team of over 100 people whose job is just to ensure that if there's ever an interruption of that service interruption is minimized. Your data losses are minimized to within a certain service level agreement that we're committed to maintaining. There's a significant part of being a cloud-based focused business that is actually embodied inside of Insight. But in essence, the things that you're able to do now, when I was showing that example of, hey, when I'm not standing in front of that operator station, can I still stay connected to my process? Insight is almost the perfect tool for you to be able to do that because you can actually see the things that are going there. And increasingly now that we have teamwork, now you can interact with your teams that are still on site, even if you're not there. So staying constantly connected to your systems are a big part of the way we see this future rolling out, and Insight is a huge component of that. We talk about AVEVA Connect. AVEVA Connect is an internal AVEVA phrase where we talk about that's the platform that we utilize that will drive all of our products towards cloud connectivity. So for example, one of the things we'll work on in AVEVA Connect is I should only have one user across all products, right? I shouldn't say I log into product A with this username and password, and I log into product B with this username and password. AVEVA Connect will do the things like the user management, authentication, entitlement access, so we can do all that in the central capability on top of AVEVA Connect. But our products all integrate with them. The products that are on-premise as well will increasingly integrate into Connect, as well as the products that are actually native SaaS. So increasingly, I use this example of, hey, Microsoft used to go to sell products individually. By the way, you can still buy products individually from Microsoft. If you wanted to have one license of Microsoft Word to run on a single computer, you can still buy it that way. Few people do because there's an extremely good value in being able to buy the entire collection of what Microsoft offers and being able to put it on multiple devices and things like that. And we're kind of taking a lot of the same cues that they had done in the marketplace in ways that we're approaching our AVEVA Operations Control. Much like in Microsoft, you have different versions. I have a different version for my family, for my small business, for my large enterprise. And we recognize that the customers that utilize our products tend to have 3 different types of operations. What we refer to as edge, supervisory, and enterprise. I'll come back to those in a moment. One of the first things that tends to happen after I started having this discussion with people are like, so you want to move my HMI to the cloud? Are you nuts? I'm not putting my HMI in the cloud. And I want to be clear, when we talk about this, I often use the term hybrid SaaS. What that means is that the things that belong on premise stay on premise. The things that belong in the cloud go to the cloud, or the things that you give advantage. So how do you make a determination of what goes on premise and what stays in the cloud? And this is a particular slide that I put together to try to make that simple. The stuff that stays on premise is typically going to be your HMIs, your device communications, right? The stuff that's happening right down on that mission critical system. When I'm down here, the pros of having things on premises is that when I say about minimal dependencies, I don't have to worry about, am I connected to the internet to operate my plant, right? There's minimal dependencies in that regard. I have high availability of those systems. So if somebody runs a truck into the substation out there in the corner, I don't have to worry about that I've lost my ability to operate my plant. And they're minimal latency. The asset's right there. I have minimal time in terms of when I ask that thing to perform an operation that it executes that. However, there are cons associated with things that are on premise. It's a pain. I have to manage that thing's life cycle. Someone's got to patch the operating system, patch the dependent software, patch the individual applications you have there, update those applications. What we have found here is customers tend to have a very, very slow adoption of innovation, meaning that customers will often spend 5, 10, 15, 20 years behind the technology curve because of their concerns with the number one issue of lifecycle management. And they're constantly facing hardware and software obsolescence. So they got computers that are out there running old operating systems on old hard drives, and they got their fingers crossed that this thing isn't just going to crumble to its knees. We're finding that's pretty consistent out there. When you look at software as a service, it's almost the inverse of the things that you're doing on premise. So in software as a service, its pros are you don't have to do anything for lifecycle management. That's not your responsibility. That's the vendor's responsibility to manage that for you. Fast innovation adoption. If you've ever worked with Insight, you get new features every 2 to 4 weeks. New features just arrive. You don't actually have to do anything to get them. Minimal hardware. You don't have to buy any hardware. So you don't have to sit there and say, well, I've got a 3 to 5 year hardware refresh cycle on this asset. Nope, that's not your responsibility. That's our responsibility to manage that. Now the cons are you do have an external dependency. Network goes down, that's not what you're going to be. You're going to not have access to that. There are some potential issues with availability and latency. So what we've decided in terms of our strategy is, if it's mission critical, keep it on premise. If it's something which is more nice to have during operations, right, like things like Insight and Teamwork, we put those in the cloud to be able to take advantage of those things. So when you hear us talk about hybrid SaaS solutions, that's really what we're talking about, is that in combination, these things work together. I've used the analogy of Microsoft, and this happens again. So very often, if I'm on a plane, I got to sit there and work on my PowerPoint deck. I fire up PowerPoint on my laptop. That is on-premise software. And then once I connect back into that system, I may upload that software to a team site and ask the other guys in my team to review it and give me feedback. Now I'm leveraging a connection between that on-premise software and the cloud to gain an advantage in the way I'm operating. That is kind of an analogy of what we will be doing in these particular cases, connecting these things together. So when I look at these things, and there's a lot more detail that I can probably utilize here, but we do recognize that our customers tend to layer their networks in layers of what we describe to as device networks, process networks, business networks, in some areas of the DMZ. I expect that to be true, continuing to be true. I do expect the cloud services to kind of be the things that will overlay them. There'll be interoperability, and we'll be focusing in those areas. Now, when I talked about earlier, we have different editions that I refer to as Edge, Supervisory, and Enterprise. The things that are happening at the edge at HMI, typically the type of work you do there is the immediate term. So very often it's a smaller scope of responsibility, the things that I'm doing, and the things I'm doing have immediate effect, right? I turn on that pump, I stop that process, I deal with that alarm, that breakdown. Up at that supervisory level, you tend to have a broader scope of responsibility, and you tend to have more of a longer term outcome expectation. What is my production plan for the week? What is the target that I'm working towards this? What is my scheduled maintenance activities I need to execute for the course of the week? I have a larger team of people typically that I'm trying to work with in this area. Increasingly, you'll hear us talk about this enterprise space. This enterprise space and what sits right between here is typically like the PI system. I often describe the PI system as that for customers start putting that PI system up into that business network, replicating the data off that plant floor to facilitate other people in the organization to make those decisions. To take that data, now I'm going to start making long-term decisions. How do I reduce my costs on waste production? How do I reduce my raw material utilization? The guy who's on the front line actually trying to start and stop the pump, you're not asking him to make those calls. You're asking other people in the organization. And inversely, the guy who's doing the things about providing energy optimization, he wouldn't know the first thing about operating that compressor, and you wouldn't want his hands on it, right? So you have different people in your organization that you need to facilitate new information to do their job. And that's kind of that notion of what we have in terms of strategizing in those 3 different editions inside of that. I won't spend a ton of time here because I'll leave this up to my friends in sales, but one of the other things we decided is that let's make it easy to achieve. Let's make it easy for people to obtain. So in the past, what we identified is a lot of people would not buy our products because it was difficult to buy them all and own them all. So we decided to make it super easy. Traditionally, what we have done in the past is that you buy a product in some quantity. I'll buy a certain number of tags for InTouch, or I buy a certain number of I/O for system platform. When we moved to Flex, we said, you can buy a single server and then you can utilize what's up to that server. That got them better. We decided we can even go higher than that. Now what we do is we just say, you have unlimited access to software. Download as many licenses as you're necessary. We'll not charge you by the number of users. So I don't care how many historians you stand up, how many object servers, how many communication servers. You achieve the architecture that makes you excellent in your business. And then we'll facilitate the access of all of that information, whether it's on-premise, whether it's SaaS, all that stuff. You have full entitlement to the entire system end to end with no architectural impact on your cost. The only thing we monitor at cost is the number of people in your product and that are using that software. So a lot of people ask me, who are people? How do I count people? If they ever log into an AVEVA piece of software, they're a person. If they're going to log into Insight, if they're going to log into Teamwork, they're going to log into the control system, they're going to log into a development system, they're going to try and create a report from the production system. Those are all people in this particular case. We identify the number of people, give everybody access to everything. How many people can use the dev tools? All of them. We don't care. Do whatever you need to do. Accomplish what you need to accomplish. This is the most innovative commercial model in our industry, and we're really, really going at it full guns. So hopefully you'll have a lot of questions, and feel free to come up and talk to us about that. This is a summary. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because I can see that I'm running short on time, and I want to show you some of the cool stuff as well. So I'm going to focus largely in this area of supervisory because we talked that the result was about modernizing SCADA. Where typically I refer to this particular area as kind of HMI, and this is more as enterprise visualization. So for the conclusion of this presentation, I'm going to focus on some of the things you're doing in this area of supervisory. Now, to be fair, if you're one of those folks that was in that timeline somewhere in the middle, I'm not covering everything we've done since 2014. I'm really going to be focusing on the deltas. So if you're sitting there and you're sitting there going, I have no idea what operations management interface is, I apologize. Some of this may be hard for you to ingest because you're going to go, well, I don't know what you changed in operations management interface because I don't know operations management interface. In that case, I ask you to invite you to come down and talk to me in the expo area. I can show you operations management interface, let you touch it, taste it, feel it for a little bit so you get some ideas. But when we look at in the system platform space, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we developed it to be able to build large applications, large geographically distributed applications. It's been a very strong success for us. We've got tens of thousands of applications around the world using this technology to do mission critical operations. Our most recent release in this area was 2023. That release actually went out in August of last year, in 2022 is when that went out. If you have not taken a look at it, like we really reworked the entire user interface for the IDE, got completely new stuff. And so, you know, the original IDE that you've been using probably since circa 2003-ish had only changed really minor incremental things, maybe some colors and some icons and stuff. We really now modernized the overall experience. That's part of that. I think I have a little video that shows some of that. Web widgets. Increasingly, you guys know technologies like ActiveX or .NET for being able to take extensible elements that are made by third-party developers and dropping them into an HMI or SCADA screen. Increasing the problem with those is that ActiveX no longer supported by any browser in the marketplace, and .NET controls are not supported on any web technologies. So we're creating a notion that's based around HTML and Java, which we call web widgets, that allows you to basically take that web content and then utilize it like an embedded control. So if I come over here and I'm going to go to a customer that has a graphics package there, a third party, like a high charts or something like that, and I want to wrap high charts in and put it inside of my solution, these web widgets are the tools that allow us to do that and will become increasingly important in our story as we go forward. Object wizards were something that we introduced in, I think it was 2020, or maybe it was 2017. I think it was 2017 we first introduced object wizards. Object wizards basically, I'm going to throw some fancy words at you, are a way of doing a polymorphic template. What that is that we found a lot of our customers built more templates than instances. It was amazing. I know a number of cases like you got 14,000 templates and 5,000 instances. Well, we built a template for every possible combination. So now we're going to get down to with a polymorphic template. In essence, now you have these options. And now we can have a single template represent hundreds, if not tens of thousands of options in a single template, as opposed to you having to build and manage hundreds of templates or thousands of templates. We really leaned into object wizards in terms of making them far better to do bulk asset work on there and bulk creation. We have a release coming up later this year. So for those of you I know, and for most of you in the room who use our products, probably struggle to try and stay current with these, we target a new release every year with new innovations every year. And some of the new innovations that are going to happen in this space here, this one is really focused on a lot of our OEMs out there. We had OEMs that were saying, I don't even want to have to create the content. I want to dynamically create the content. I want to be able to run scripts that say place symbol X at position Y and link it to data Z. and do those things completely on the fly. Maybe they're going to access information out of a database, use that information in the database to dynamically generate that application. That's what this thing's about. Improved IDE search and filter. So we got some feedback about people like, hey, I'd like to be able to find things in an easier way. So we're improving the tools there. The accordion menu is one example of increasing number of LMI apps. We had a customer who was looking at more modern user interface design and said, I would like to build a navigation construct using accordion menus. Accordion menus are like when I select the menu and expand, and I reselect it and it contracts again. So we're going to increase the number of content out there. Those are just some examples there. And I think here's some videos that show you a little bit about the new user interface for the IDE. So if you've used and loved the IDE for a lot of years, everything that you've done in the past is still here. We're trying to streamline that experience as well as modernize the experience inside of the system. So if you have not seen it with the new ribbon bars, there's a lot of things that you can do now. And I invite you to take a look at that. Another aspect of here that was a really interesting one that came out in 2023 was expressions in historian client. So in the historian client now, if you wanted to say A plus B, you can just type it right in there and it'll allow back to handle it for you. So in this example, they're showing you how you can create that expression there and then save that back even so that you can retrieve it later. So very, very cool way of doing on-the-fly calculations and putting them on your trends and things of that nature. Teamwork got some interesting work there where we now can actually do things like we can message each other. So I can be on the plant floor and I can take a picture of something and I can then send it directly to some specific individual in the system. Increasingly, we looked at what happened during the pandemic where everybody's now remote. Right? I have some engineering teams that say, I'm not allowed on the plant floor. My operator's allowed there. I'm not allowed out there. And so I have trouble being able to collaborate them. And so now we're building it into the system now that you'll be able to do things like instant message. We're eventually going to be put full of real-time video into this as well. So you can do video conference, you can share screens, you can do things and work with them back and forth. Some exciting things. Again, that'll live in the cloud, that functionality. I won't ever have someone to manage that on premise in their own systems because that's just an example of a great software as a service play there. Kind of coming up to the end here, if you look at our overall roadmap, I talked to you about 2023. Those are things that came out. That's that teamwork chat function that went up there. We're continuing to invest in insight and providing new ways of doing the user interface. GeoSCADA is something that you may have known as Clear SCADA. We don't tend to sell it through this marketplace, so I won't spend a lot of time here on that. We're really focusing also now on how we can start managing things in the cloud. One of the things we're looking at here, where it talks about asset inferencing. On many of our products, you have to define an asset. So if I come over and say, I've got a new pump, how many places do I have to define that pump? Well, I'm hoping very soon the answer is one. You go to one place to find the pump, and that anywhere that uses the pump uses that standard asset library, and then it just knows about the pump. So if I'm in Teamwork, I know about the pump. If I'm in InTouch, I know about the pump. Or if I'm in System Platform, I know about the pump. Or if I'm in my reports package, I know about that pump already, as opposed to having to import and merge and synchronize and do things like that. We're really focusing on centralizing those things. Edge 2023 got a huge focus on Linux. So for those of you who are using Edge, we're really focusing on what we used to call, we're still calling it IoT View, and increasing the number of things you can do inside of IoT View. These things we're doing here, I'm going to give you a quick teaser. In 2023, R2, which will be late this year, our real focus is really pivoting from a bunch of products that are in a package to a single product experience. Here's some of the examples of things that we prioritize to do as part of that single product experience. I talked already about unifying that identity. So everybody's probably familiar with the Microsoft ID, right? You can use the same ID to log into your Xbox or log into to your Microsoft Word. You have that single identity across Microsoft. We're building that single identity across all of AVEVA here so that every one of our products, whether it's an on-premise product or a cloud product, you can have a single identity. So again, centralizing that user management. Common asset model I described a little bit. Common data structures. We went through across our products and realized we have data structures that are very different, whether it's super tags and InTouch, classes and Edge, equipment and plan SCADA, or automation objects and system platform. We're actually going to be introducing this notion of UDTs that will be working across all of our products, and you can import them from control systems and such, and there's going to be some pretty cool things we're doing there. Cloud-based entitlement for all access. This is more about facilitating our customers access to the things you bought. Right now, the number one problem we have with people that are using operations control is they don't know what they have ownership of. They're like, what is all in here? So we're putting it in one page, go to the cloud, here's everything, and you'll be able to get it in one spot. Web first end user experience. I can tell you that we are now going to be starting to make our products more functional in the web than they are on premise. That is, we are now web first in terms of our investment in our products there. Secure hybrid cloud adoption. I know the number one fear when I go out there and I start talking about hybrid SaaS is like, you want to connect my plant floor systems to the internet? You must be mad. You lost your mind. Now, I wouldn't ever tell you to naked expose your plant floor systems to the internet, but there are secure mechanisms where I can say the only thing that's accessible is teamwork, or the only thing that's accessible is Insight. There are secure ways of doing that. We already have that mechanism inside of Insight. It's actually called DMZ Secure Link. We're going to be expanding the functionality of DMZ Secure Link to allow that interoperability between the cloud in a very secure manner. So I'm going to go straight after that fear that exists in the marketplace that these things can't be done. And that is one of the core things we're working on here. Unified data source management. In this particular case, when I continue to invest in things like MQTT and OPC UA and IEC 61850, one of the things I look at is like all of our products kind of do it in a different way. Whether it's access names over here, or DI objects over there, or driver sheets over here, we're going to be looking at how we manage it in a very simple way so that all products can access all different data sources, not just drivers, but data sources in general in a very common manner. Probably just the start of some things that are going to be big. We have patches that are going to be coming out on a quarterly cadence now. So we're moving from a more haphazard approach, and so now we're going to be putting patches in here. So we have a patch that will be coming out the end of this month, and there's a little Easter egg in that patch if anybody actually goes and downloads it. So here's the industrial graphic editor. The Easter egg in this particular patch is that now if you ever want to, you can take an SVG, drag it onto the screen, and it'll just convert it to a native industrial graphic content. This will be interesting, especially for those system integrators. If you ever have somebody that is a UI UX designer, they go off and use a tool like Figma, and they're like, hey, here's the design I want to use. And then you're like, I guess I have to recreate that. What's the width of this? What's the height of that? What color did you use there? Now you just go, whoop, and it's inside of your system there. So very cool stuff. So that'll be some of the interesting things that'll be coming out of there. Thank you so much for your attention and your time this morning.